I've been waiting all day for this. Baron, my handsome man.
Hi, human.
Hey, babe, you ready? All right, let's roll it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Soul Sense. Today, I'm really excited because a topic in my life for quite some time has been sobriety and recovery and moving away from different substances. And I'm going to introduce to you a woman who I met in school last semester, Jude. Excuse me, let me turn that back. And Jude, what really drew me to you is also you have a very similar story. But first, let me introduce you and say thank you so much for stopping in to speak with us.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm now just rounding 15 months of sobriety from alcohol, and I'm over 4 years of having walked away from hard drugs. My drug of choice was cocaine, and it was a relapse actually later into my 30s, almost 12 years after I had recovered sort of from my first time through. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief very, very brief Cliff's Notes on where I was. So when you kind of came across my path, one of the things that stood out to me was you've also made the decision in your life to walk away from alcohol. And I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I want to say from the start that it is probably the greatest thing, the greatest gift I ever gave myself. And I want to add the people around me. The disease of addiction is so powerful. And, you know, I'm a middle-class woman. I'm living in Mexico. I'm living the dream. I'm having the best life ever. But it didn't start that way. And, you know, my decision to get sober, I have to say, was made for me. Because I found myself in a catastrophic car accident in which I realized at that kind of epiphany moment that I could have killed other people. I was 3 times the limit drinking. I was in a very, very dark, bad place in my life. And I realized that was the thing, that I could kill other people with my drinking. And that's not what I set out to do that day. I have to say that previous to that, I had made pacts with myself over, I'm not gonna drink today, I'm not gonna drink today, every day for probably 10 years. I was a daily drinker. So the prospect of never drinking again was beyond my physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional conception. And I knew I could not do it by myself. So my doctor referred me to a treatment center where I spent 28 days. I'm gonna call it helping me resolve the calamity of my thinking, which is truly at the bottom of my drinking. There are a lot of people who say that drinking is the problem. Alcohol was, or alcohol, how does it go? Alcohol is the problem. For me, alcohol was my solution. So I drank for every reason. There were only 2 points in my life where I did not daily drink. One was when I was pregnant, and the other when I was in my first year in the Peace Corps. So that's, you know, I spent, from the time I was really quite young. So I want to say about addiction that I'm a huge subscriber to Gabor Mate's kind of hypothesis that at the core of every addict is a traumatized human being, because you can't really look at the progression of the disease without looking at somebody's past and how we get stuck. So I went through a 28-day treatment program, and I'm going to say I was scared sober, and that because I saw what I was capable of, and that's truly not what this heart and this soul intended to do. You know, it was only then that I was able to see how much damage it could do to other people. I'm a mother, and at the time, my daughter was a teenager, probably the time she needed her mother most, and I was completely unavailable. So I'm gonna say that peer support and 12 steps were instrumental in my recovery. I'm a godless, arrogant asshole most of the time. And so it's pretty amazing that I could get over myself and find a way to surrender to a need to completely make myself over. From the way I thought, to the cultural agreements that I made as a child, to how I judge the world, how I judge myself. Very complex. And I wasn't a spring chicken when this happened. I was on the cusp of 50 years old. So I took my sobriety, which was very small, and I put it in every recovery position I could. I became addicted to yoga. I became a yoga instructor. I have taken the yoga instruction course twice. I also am a trained yoga of 12-step recovery instructor, and I have taken that training twice. I have never really taught yoga. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. One reason is that I really sought the spiritual component for my own recovery. And the second reason is I teach for free. It's a pay it forward thing for me. And people seem to devalue my gift. She must not be a very good yoga teacher.
Right, she's just teaching it for free.
So I've had a couple of opportunities to actually teach yoga big, like at a medical marijuana festival, where I was invited to Montana, and that was incredible. That was incredible. I also became very involved for a while in women in sobriety. I read everything that I could read on how the brain works. And I realized that much of what I had to do was undo the damage or mitigate the damage that had really deep roots inside of me. One of the things that we do in the yoga of 12-step recovery is look at the child risk assessment tool, which is a longitudinal study that looks at adverse outcomes depending on the kind of adverse experience you had as a child. And I was the only person who scored perfect. And for several days after that, I thought to myself, it's a miracle that I'm alive. It is a miracle that I'm alive, and that I actually feel as though my recovery has given me a sense of sanity, a sense of purpose. I have other isms that I fight with. I truly believe that we never truly recover, which is why it is a daily reprieve. And by that, I mean that I am only as healthy as my willingness to surrender every day to the fact that I'm an addict. So that's really important to my recovery, because as soon as I get sort of complacent about who I really am, I my addiction does push-ups waiting for me to have a weak moment. And I say that, the disconnect between who we are and addiction is really profound. I mean, I'm not saying this to tootie my own horny, but I worked for 24 years in a psychiatric hospital as an advocate for patients with psychiatric illnesses. And the largest comorbid variable to having a mental illness is an addiction. And lo and behold, as I get sober and I'm not getting mentally better, I am diagnosed with a very treatable mental illness. And to this day, I take a cocktail of medications prescribed to me by a very loving and caring psychiatrist with whom I have an amazing therapeutic alliance, which is also part of my recovery.
Mm-hmm.
For me to accept in my 50s that I had a mental illness was, especially as an advocate for psychiatric patients,
Right.
had the power to really mess with my ego. But it didn't. It didn't. I was like, it almost came at the right time for me. And I believe that we aren't really given more than we can handle. This was just a crossover of chapters in my life. And I was given the opportunity to hand it off to somebody else. And so I think the hardest thing about being sober and my age, there's two things that are extremely difficult. One is that there was a certain point where my doctor felt that I should not go back to work. And that was the confluence of menopause, which could not be treated because of this mental illness that had appeared, and my addiction. So I was crazy. I was simply crazy for 2 years. Crazy. And I just had to, and it was only in hindsight that I realized it was menopause. I mean, so that part being about my age, and also the inertia that comes with aging. I'm now in my 60s, and I have to tell myself that I am no longer that young person who did yoga every day. For me, if I hit the pillow sober every night, I feel like I have done a real day's work, because it's really simple to not drink. It really can be after detoxing, but it isn't easy to be in recovery and to live your life, in a manner that kind of radiates a certain integrity and a certain love of being alive, because ultimately the choice between getting sober and staying sick, and it's a tough choice. The rewards of always being loaded, people know. Also the horrors, but it's a choice between living and dying. And when I made that choice to live, I took everything that meant to me, which is why it was my daughter who said the other day, "I'm so fucking jelly. You're living your best life."
She's right. And I think that in listening to everything you're saying, not only do I continue to feel inspired by humans, like yourself, but I just want to say thank you for choosing life, because you have something to share that's, that I find is really rare. And I do find it really rare for people to step away from alcohol. I think that's something that's just so embedded and weaved into the way that our culture works here. Your 19th birthday and all of the different ways in which we're just kind of always promoting this thing to everybody all the time, but we don't recognize the damage behind closed doors to which so many people are experiencing. And so for you to be able to shift and shape shift and change your life, and not only be like a change agent for other people with what you do and work and that kind of thing, but to be one for yourself, I know is the most difficult decision, but it's the most rewarding decision. And I can only hope to get as far as you are on the journey, and I know that I will, and because I can't ever imagine going back to it now. I do have those moments where I crave it, and also I maybe am different than you in the sense that I don't so much attach myself to being an addict the way that I used to. Like, I used to wake up and remind myself, like, you're an addict and this is how we're going to move through the process of this. I now feel like I stand firmly in the belief that at one point in my life I battled addiction, but it isn't really what I attach to now. I still have I have to be just as careful and all of those different things, but I try to sort of shape the way I think about it. And so that's interesting for me to do that. But what do you think about, the difference between someone who doesn't really connect with being an addict versus someone who always thinks that they're in continuous recovery? Or do you think that, does your outlook on that change at all?
No, it doesn't. I'm pretty solid and firm in my belief that one's an addict and always an addict. And it's, I've seen people relapse hard, and everything that I've read, really indicates that you actually pick up where you left off. It's not gradual, and I've seen the carnage. I've seen people taken out by a relapse after a lot of recovery. And, the question why, we're all one needle, one armband, one straw away from addiction again. And that's the vigilance that I can kid myself. I want to really say it's about how I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's the trickiness and manipulation of my own brain about lies I tell myself. And I would call it alcoholic thinking. And that's the danger. Not, I don't have a desire. It's my thinking that I worry about. And one of the things, I forgot to mention this, that was instrumental in my recovery, I did 2 solid years of neurofeedback to, in my really humble, simplistic understanding of it, the balancing of right and left hemispheres. And I was so constantly cortisol aroused in my existence that this intervention, which is like a non-intervention, was incredible. It was just an incredible tool to settle my brain. And because they do pre and post tests, I could see how it worked. It was really, really helpful to me in my recovery.
In your recovery, I've done neurofeedback at a younger age for depression. Can you, I've never used it as a tool or a piece of support in my recovery. I've often thought about doing it and going back to exploring that avenue as well again, or in, my years recovered. Can you explain a little bit more what it is for anyone who doesn't know what neurofeedback is?
Neurofeedback is, and again, I am no neurofeedback scientist. This is just like a chicken the chairs kind of interpretation. Is a means to sort of change your beta and theta waves, to calm them down a bit and to balance your right and left hemispheres. It's the deepest sort of waves in the brain. And they attach electrodes, what seem to be electrodes, to your head in about 5 or 6 spots. And during the actual treatment, you feel nothing. You're looking at a screen which has fractals, which you don't even have to look at. You can bring your own music. And for 33 minutes-ish, which is a full treatment, you can sort of hear a little bit of crackling, but you feel nothing. And they've already tested you to show you the degree at which your brainwaves are functioning. So afterwards, they do it again, and you can see that they have like simmered down, and it's profound. I mean, I got to the point where I didn't need them to do the pre and post test because I was so acutely aware, and I could tell in my activities that I had slowed down a little bit, right? It seemed unimaginable because I was literally so cortisol aroused all the time.
Wow.
Which is in fact like this hypervigilance that trauma survivors have. So all of those symptoms came out after I got sober.
Wow.
Yeah, so neurofeedback was marvelous. And in Kingston, we have a couple of clinics that do sliding scales for payment. And so for a while I was able to go at no cost. And it was pretty amazing.
And it was very relaxing too. The one I've done is in Kingston, and I think at first I was anything new. I was much younger, but I do remember it being a relaxing experience and something that I don't think at the time I understood what was going on, but I knew that it was helping me. So it was a nice feeling. Yeah, you mentioned something else that I'm very curious about, because although I have, in my world stopped using, cocaine, my substance of choice, and I've been moved away from alcohol, I still am a cannabis user. And you did mention, in your recovery and yoga and going and doing, to a medical marijuana type of event. And sometimes people often say to me, that I can't consider myself to be a sober individual because there's still cannabis use in my life. And I don't have a medical license to use it. I use it recreationally sometimes, and other times for a little bit of anxiety or sleep aid or that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on cannabis use as someone who is moved away from other substances? Because I do always
tell you that I'm a cannabis user.
Okay.
I have a license. And I'm going to tell you the context in which it was prescribed. And, I am fascinated by the science behind it.
Okay.
I was diagnosed after a year of being sober with ADHD. And this not being able to settle was really messing me up. So I was on Ritalin for 5 years. And it really helped. And then I needed to get off of it because it was turning on me. And I knew this. I felt like I was speedy all the time and I couldn't eat. So it was my choice to get off of it. And it's an incredibly addictive substance. And in order to do that, I was prescribed a very specific kind of marijuana. And I have a medical license.
Okay.
I'm here to tell you that I have, I don't think it's a judgment. It's not meant to be a judgy thing. It's meant to make you the best human being that you can be on the planet. And how do you get there? Right? I chose a certain path for me that's given me untold rewards. And I still smoke marijuana.
I like that. And, often, and one thing I say when it's brought up to me is the way that I used cocaine or I used alcohol to escape the pain that I was feeling. And I very much am a, Gabor Mate cheerleader also. And it isn't, stop asking why the addiction, start asking why the pain. I do feel like I've done a lot of work in my healing and my time recovering, figuring out all of the reasons I was running from my life. And so I find when I use cannabis, it's never for a reason to escape reality. It's always, maybe it is that I want to giggle and watch a movie and do a thing and I reach for it that way. Or, I've had a really crazy week and I want to sleep, but I always make sure to check in with myself with it too, and not being naive that it is a substance, but one that I feel very differently about. So I just appreciate your opinion on that, and the reason that you use it, which is great.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if other people would agree with me. This is just my experience. So yeah.
I like that. Jude, thank you so much. I really appreciate you stopping in to chat with me and just with all of our community and our viewers. And I think the more that we can have these conversations and normalize what addiction is, and that, there's so many of us going through it or recovering from it or in that pre-contemplative stage of thinking maybe that there's something going on, the less of a stigma there is that goes along with it. And we can all get a little closer to potentially healing and moving through that. So I just appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you. And I have to say, stigma is actually the biggest enemy to healing. I believe that.
I agree. I agree. We'll keep having conversations. You're beautiful. Thank you for checking in from Mexico. It's snowing here, so it's great.
Beautiful here. Thank you.
Thank you.